very much for coming this morning. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. Can I remind members that the meeting will be webcast live to the public. For those not able to watch the footage live, the webcast will be available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Can I also remind members and officers to please switch their microphone on when speaking and then turn it off when you've finished. We have two substitutions today. Mr. Bolter is here in place of Mr. Charlesworth, and Mr. Harrison is here in place of Mrs. Fryer. As you are aware, we have a single item on the agenda today, the development of a unitary structure for local government in Leicestershire. We have a number of expert witnesses attending in the morning to give us their views. We'll then break for lunch around 12:30 and reconvene for the afternoon session at 1:30. Can I please check that you've all got additional papers, which are the supplementary agenda, which is basically the minutes of all the scrutiny meetings that have taken place, and also the piece of paper which has the draft agenda and who we're going to hear from today, crib sheet for the business. Just a few formalities then before we get into the process. Minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of October. Are you all happy that I sign those as a true and accurate record? Okay. Item 2, question time. I've not received any questions from the public under Standing Order 7375, nor have I received any questions from elected members. Item 4, there are no items to take as urgent items elsewhere on the agenda today. Item 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any interests they wish to declare? Before taking those, I am assuming that all members who are district and borough councillors will wish to declare a personal interest under item 8, the development of the unitary structure for local government in Leicestershire.
Yes.
You all happy with that?
Yes.
Are there any other interests? Declarations of the party whip. Anyone wish to declare that today? I hope not. Good. Presentation of petitions, item 7. Not received any other petitions. That then takes us to the main item of business today. Now, I am aware that this is a contentious issue of which members have strong views. I think the way I'd like to approach this is that scrutiny tries and adds value to this process. We produce a factual report and we go into a number of details and issues which I know are of concern to members and which need more clarity. And if we can do that, we will have achieved the objective. And I remind members that at the end of the process, we will need to make a report to the Cabinet, who will then look at this in due course, and then further on, it will go to the full Council. So, without further ado, first section this morning, can I welcome Baroness Scott to Leicestershire. Thank you very much for coming and taking part in our scrutiny session this morning. Also, for this section, we have Nick Rushton, Leader of the Council. This is just for the record because I know you all know him. And Byron Rhodes, Deputy Leader of the Council. And the first section this morning is for Nick and Byron to set the scene. So without further ado, Nick, would you like to start?
Yeah, first of all, Simon, can I place on record my thanks as the leader to you as the head of scrutiny for treating the whole agenda seriously and providing so far good meetings, I'm told. And also thank Terry Einan as the leader of the Labour group as well for treating the whole agenda seriously. Whether you're for it or against it, I thank you for treating it in the way you've treated it. Can I also put on record my thanks to Jane, Baroness Scott, for attending she's the leader of Wiltshire. As you know, Wiltshire went unitary, I think around 10 years ago. We've also, I know you're having Simon Hennig from, I think it's Durham, and eventually the leader of Cornwall, once you can coordinate it. And hopefully you're also going to ask in 2 district leaders, so I hear, Simon, one from Hinckley Bosworth, and I think it's Harborough. I don't want to say much more, Simon. It's your meeting. We're here to give evidence to you, and as you say, eventually a report will come to Cabinet. I'm aware of the letter, obviously, from the 7 members of Parliament. I'm aware that the 7 district councils have decided that they don't want to do anything with this process at all, although I now note they're sending 2 people to give evidence. And as I said to you yesterday, Simon, at the leaders' meeting with Terry, that I'll be taking this matter to our group on the 4th of December for further instructions about how to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. As you've raised the issue of the district leaders, I think I'll make comment on that now, because I wrote to them about 10 days ago, giving them the opportunity to come and speak to the Scrutiny Commission. I have heard back, and as you say, they've chosen 2 leaders who are not double-hatted members to come. Unfortunately, they can't make either of our dates, and they're asking for an additional date to be scheduled to hear them. My proposal is that the Scrutiny Commissioners need to discuss that, because the diary does start to get quite busy in December, as do members' commitments. But they have made an offer to come, and we need to process that in terms of the best way to deal with it. So we will obviously inform everyone how we're going to deal with that in due course. As you'd mentioned that, Nick, I thought it was important to put that on the record. Okay, Byron. Now, of course, you also hold the portfolio holder for resources and finance, which is absolutely key to all this. And you may obviously want to make comments in relation to that.
Well, thank you, Simon. We've fortunately had the opportunity to sit in this room on 4 occasions last week, when the individual scrutiny committees went through the detail in respect of the areas that they're responsible for: adults and communities, children and families, environment and transportation, and health. And that gave them the opportunity to look at the effect that a unitary council would have in the service areas which they're responsible for. And that, of course, was demonstrated then, and is in the minutes which are in front of the Commission members today, that there are considerable opportunities for greatly improving those services as a result of having a single approach. The other thing we talked about last week as well was the strategic opportunities of a single council working with other councils in cooperation, particularly across the East Midlands, and the strength it would have in being able to represent the county effectively to government, to bring in investment, and bear in mind that the investment levels in the East Midlands from central government are considerably lower in relation to the population compared with, say, the West Midlands and many other areas of the country, and it's a source of real concern to us that we're not able to pull that investment in. And the third point, of course, is, as you referred to in Chairman, in your remarks a moment ago, is the financial aspects. All local government is still facing a very, very considerable pressure on its finances. And although the Chancellor and the Prime Minister before him have announced the end of austerity, austerity it's not the word is understood but not defined very well when it comes to government finances. We take it to believe that although more money is now going to be made available in the totality for government for public services, it's not necessarily all going to be distributed evenly between the different features. So whereas the health service has already been announced is going to get another 20 billion, and everyone's happy with that and pleased with that, it's such a large proportion of that extra money that's going to be made available that it calls into question whether the unprotected areas of service, like local government, are going to see increases, or whether in fact they might see further decreases in funding. And in fact the expectation at the moment, and we'll see if it's corrected when we get the settlement, are that in fact that funding actually might continue to decrease, as it has done, and it's decreased steadily since 2008 or 2009. So, as in the projections that we have here in Leicestershire, we're anticipating that we'll lose government grant, continue to lose government grant at the rate of about 10 million a year into the foreseeable future. And we'll also have to face all the cost pressures, which are very considerable now, not just because of the numbers of people we're looking after in adult care, but also because of the particular pressures coming from government legislation. And one of the particular ones I'll just mention here, which is now giving us real concern, is in special educational needs children. The numbers are increasing enormously. There's been 32% increase in the number of SEN children in Leicestershire over the last 3 years. And the result of that is that we are having considerable pressure in the high needs block of the direct school grant area, which threatens to fall over as a pressure on our mainstream budget. We've also got enormous pressures on SEN transport. Now, I only use those as an example because I can bring you many others if we get into that level of detail during the course of the meeting. But it does mean to say that if we have an opportunity of changing the way we do things in Leicestershire, not just by having a single authority, but the way in which we actually go about our business, there are still considerable opportunities for reducing our costs and containing these financial pressures, and therefore maintaining or indeed improving services to the public. And that is our ambition, and that's the reason, the other reason for putting forward these proposals to you today. I think I've said enough now because I know you want to hear Baroness Scott.
Thank you, Byron. Thank you for that scene setting. I do. The finance is absolutely key. I'm sure we're going to come back to that this afternoon in terms of the impacts. Right, Baroness Scott, you've got Jane. Okay, that I was going to ask you if you're okay with that. We do try to deal on first name terms. So thank you for coming again. Basically, you've got the floor to explain how it works in Wiltshire. I hope you'll be willing to take some questions at the end of that from members. But please present your presentation.
Are you happy for me to sit here, Chairman? Yeah.
Well, you might stand up. I'm going to move.
She can't. No. Sorry. I'm getting advice because the meeting's being webcast. To catch the camera, you need to sit down. I'm sorry. And if you and Nick, could you put the microphone on for Jane?
There we
can
go.
do it herself.
Right. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Jane Scott. I'm leader of Wiltshire Council. I was leader of Wiltshire County Council back in 2003. So I led our journey from being the county council and 4 district councils to being a unitary authority in 2009. Just to give you a bit of background on me, I was a dual hatter. I was a member right up until the end of the districts in the county. I was a member of the County Council and North Wiltshire District Council. So I've been there and I've seen local government. And that has a real influence because when in 2007, when it was then Labour government, offered us the opportunity to consider unitary authority, I knew what it was like to be a twin hatter. I knew what the districts did. I knew what the county did. And I have to say, having been very new to local government in the late 90s, I couldn't quite understand why the system was as the system was. So for me, it was a natural progression to ask the then Labour government if we could put our name in the hat. So 10 years ago, we believed that the unitary was the best option. We spent a lot of time looking at it. I spent a lot of time with my then chief executive at the county council, looking forward 10, 15, 20 years and wondering how we were going to manage the costs of demography, particularly in our county, ageing population, increasing even at that time and even more so now the number of children in our care, and how, as the time we were a county council which was the second lowest funded in the country, how we were going to manage those pressures and still keep the services that we felt were really important. So actually what we did back in 2007, when I was a new leader, we actually started a grouping of district and county to look at the big picture and to look at how we could work better together, to look how we could procure together. I have to say there were some small wins, but often when it got to the decisions of doing things together, it often came back to power and who took the savings. So sort of a little bit of success, but not a lot. But we were working very closely at that time with our district councils. We also had a 70-odd% Twin Hatters as well, so you know it was similar to you. We also decided as a county council that we couldn't continue to have the same relationship with our communities that we had at the time. We knew because pressures were beginning to come on our services that we were going to have to support communities to be much stronger, to take over much more of the responsibility for themselves. This whole issue of everybody wanting something and getting it from the council was no longer sustainable. So our vision was to create these stronger and more resilient communities. And interestingly, I spoke to 1,000 staff yesterday, and still our vision is to create those stronger communities. We cannot afford, in my opinion, to give everybody what they want. We have to have a different relationship. So 5 councils, 4 district councils, and 1 county council merged. It was not a county council takeover, absolutely not. It was the opportunity for Wiltshire to look at a different type of local government, a totally different council, different relationships with the public, different councillors, different types of officers that had different views on public service, and we took that opportunity to do that. We had support, and it's not quite like you because we had a very finite time to do it in. It's about 18 months from beginning of the first council meeting to actually becoming a unitary. Very quick process. But we did very early on get a lot of support from our key partners, particularly the business communities. They came on board very, very quickly and said, no, we are fed up having to go to 2 tiers. We want 1 tier. We want to have a strategic conversation with you about the economy, about planning, etc. They came on board. Police came on board. Fire sat on the fence a little bit. The MOD was certainly on board, so was the health service. And it was all to them about simplicity of doing business with local government. Our case that we put to government was not just about money. If you remember 2009, the real pressures on finances hadn't exactly started. So actually ours was about devolution, becoming a strategic, efficient, effective council at a high level, and devolution down to our towns and our parishes. And I'll talk more about that later. But also, it was also about working locally. So we do have area boards, which I'll talk again a bit more, but it was about how we could work as a strategic council locally through our local councils as local leaders with our communities. And that those boards would have they weren't just talking shops, they actually had some teeth through the executive and responsibilities and finances. We wanted to improve customer services. What people were telling us in Wiltshire is, we don't know who to go to. If you ring up your district council, they say it's not us, or ring up the district county and they say it's not us. They wanted something. They said, all we want is a council. And that's quoting our people. All we want is a council. We don't really matter how you organise yourselves, as long as you give us good, efficient services at affordable cost. And of course then it was about savings, because it was about sustainability of those services, and we realised that I think without even going into huge detail, there has to be a great deal of savings. Our budget at that time was around 865 million as a county council. So that's the sort of level we were at. Right. Sorry, didn't I turn it on? I'm useless at this sort of thing, but sorry. Remembering to turn it on. Right. As I said, money was beginning to get tighter, but nothing like is happening now. But it was as much about demography as it is, I think, probably with you and with us now as well. It's not just the fact you haven't got a lot the money, it's the fact that the number of people that need your services, particularly the vulnerable groups, that was pressurising us, and older people and younger people all needing our services. I said public confusion on who did what, but we thought that if we got something that was simple and people knew exactly who was responsible, then actually we could raise the confidence levels in us and the satisfaction levels. This was a time when actually local government didn't have very good satisfaction levels. It's better now than it was. So we wanted to be the ones responsible and the buck stopping with the council, because we felt that that would be a better relationship with our local people. We also, partnerships, there was this was a time when we were beginning to start to talk about strategic partnerships with health, with police, with fire and rescue, and particularly with the businesses. And it was complex in a two-tier system, very complex. And that's all right for us that are in the system, but for those people that are out of the system, that complexity was actually stopping some of the strategic partnership that we wanted to do, because there was too many people around the table, couldn't quite understand who was responsible for which bit of it, and we were not getting as far forward as we should have been with some of those things that we wanted to do. I hate saying this in front of district councillors because it was quite a difficult message. The county councils deliver 85% of the services locally, and I got told through our process, yes, but you don't deliver local services. I'm sorry, but when I send a care worker out to wash somebody's feet in their own home, there is nothing more local than that. And there was a sort of realisation came that actually the services the county council delivered were as local as the district council services, but they weren't engaging quite as locally as they should do. And that bothered me, because if we were going to be there to support communities to become stronger, then we actually needed to be in those communities a lot more with all those services, not just the district services. So, and we wanted a better engagement from the communities with local government as a whole, not just one part of it. And as I've talked about the resilience, it was a really strong factor in the fact of this different relationship with our communities. Right, let's see if has it gone on? No. Not happening. Where is it? Has it gone behind you? Oh God, I've gone too much. Is that the one? No. Right, okay, thank you. I told you, it's not my... I talk from the heart usually, not it's my... The journey for us was that one district council, North Wiltshire actually, the one and it was a Liberal Democrat controlled council, could see the vision, could see the reason we were doing it, didn't go out very proactively, but certainly didn't react negatively to us. The parishes and town councils actually were quite supportive. Not all, but many of them quite supportive, because they could see the simplicity in the delivery. Key to what we did was we just went out. I went out and talked to whoever would listen to me. And I did over 250 meetings in about a year. I stood in a supermarket, I went to leisure centres, I went to every parish council, or somebody went to every parish council. We just talked to everybody with our vision. And the reason we could do that, I think, was that we had a very, very clear and simple business case, not just about money, but about services. And we were able to go out and just talk and talk about it. You know, it was hard. I took a lot of brickbats, but it was, I think it was worth it. But you could only do that if you had a very clear vision and a very clear business case to do it. A lot of people were interested in particular things. Housing was one, development control planning was another that concerned local people. So we did a lot of single issue sheets telling them how we were going to deal with those things, how we were going to deal with community area partnerships, how we were going to have a relationship with our partners and businesses and things like that. We did a lot of these citizens' workshops. Maury did some of that with us. And what was interesting when we started to look at it was that there were huge variations in services from the district councils across the piece, which was really interesting. Benefits, housing benefits, admin costs, they went from in one district £1.19 a head to £11.87 a head. And we were beginning to unearth lots of really difficult things. Same with costs of planning, same with council tax collections, real differences in the way we could do that. And so it began to become clear, and particularly for my Byron, that actually, you know, if we could just get some of these costs down to the lowest of the districts, we would be saving money, let alone if we didn't do anything else. My own party was difficult. I'm not being party political, but I did it under a Labour government. So there was obviously lots of difficulties for me. But I have to say that some of our supporters, as they're written down there, lobbied government for us. They actually went out and lobbied for us, which was very good. Obviously, as we went, we had to go down to one chief executive. Interestingly enough, our district chief executives, bar one, I think, who came in on our senior management team doing the district services, left. They'd already seen the writing on the wall and they left. And it wasn't, the officer side was actually not difficult, because we worked with them and it wasn't difficult. I just put there that I have no chief executive now. That happened about 18 months after we went to unitary, but that's a different story. And of course, the big move was in the early days was taking those 5 management teams down to 1, and if you're looking at savings and not believing in savings, then to me that's the one thing. Well, hang on a minute. You make the savings out of one management team, let alone the savings that you make out of all the other things that you can do that you didn't do. Right. Let's move on. Get to some. Right. What are we now? We're the ninth largest council in the country. Now, you could say, well, so what? And the 3rd largest planning authority. The so what is actually you get a bigger voice. You get a bigger voice. You get and that's useful. I can assure you that they listen more, the government, to Wiltshire Council than they did to Wiltshire County Council. And I think that helps. But it's not just that. When you're procuring business, then actually being larger helps you to procure much more efficiently. That's just a little bit about us. We're about half the size of Leicestershire, I think. you can see our ageing population is incredible. The one thing we have, which makes us very different, and which has been extremely helpful being a unitary council, is that we have about a quarter, just over a quarter, of the British Army living and working in Wiltshire, and we have 12% of our population are veterans of the military. And it has been, because of army basing, where the soldiers are coming back from Germany next summer, this has been key. If we had not been a county council, if we'd have been a county and a district, a two-tier, it would have been very, very difficult to manage that. Because we've been a unitary, we have been responsible for all the planning, all the economic development. We've had clear relationships with health, about leisure, and we've been able to do that in a very, very efficient and effective way, which would have been almost impossible, I think, if we'd have been working on a two-tier system. As I have to say, would have Salisbury. The fact that the Salisbury issue, as you all know, from March, and the fact that we have led the complete recovery of that with the government has been a lot easier, having been because we as a unitary authority have got the capacity. We have got a large economic development team. We've got our large public health team, and all those things have gone in. I think it would have been a lot different. The bottom one is just to give you a bit of an idea about the county. We have high house prices and we have low value jobs. And where does that fit in with the unitary is because we were almost, many of our towns were almost like mill towns back in the late 90s. We had food, particularly ham and bacon. We had Harris, we had all the pie manufacturers, etc., all in Wiltshire, very, very low value jobs. And in order to change that, first of all, we had to have control over those because they were going out of business and leaving big holes in our towns and a very unskilled workforce. We've had to really grasp hold of the skills agenda, make sure that our children are coming out of school with really good outcomes. We've also had to make sure that they are re-educated and re-skilled for the different jobs they're going, but we've also had to take a very strategic look at where the economic development sites are in the county, how they fit in with the infrastructure, how they fit in with the housing development. And because we've been able to do it county-wide, we've been able to take a much more strategic view of it. What was happening in the early 2000s, and many of our businesses were saying they were going to leave the county because the districts haven't provided big enough economic development sites for them to grow. We've been able to look at the county as a whole and change that and keep people in and bring people in. Okay, see if that works. Right, this is the money bit that you want, I know you're all interested in. It's quite difficult because we've gone through this austerity to split out what is because we've been to a unitary and what is because we've had to make the decisions because of austerity. What I will say is, yes, we've had to do both, but what we haven't had to do is make some of the very, very difficult decisions that many other councils have had to make. So we haven't closed libraries. In fact, we've built libraries. We haven't closed leisure centres. We haven't closed children's centres. All the things that many others have had to take really difficult decisions on, we haven't. And we have continued to invest more money every year into adult care services and into children's services because that's been necessary. So we've not had to make the big decisions. The ballpark figure that we talk about that I think has got the evidence behind it is it's £25 million of savings per annum reoccurring, and those are revenue savings. But there are other savings that are one-offs and non-cashable savings through very much more efficient processes. And the back office has to be the big one. It has to be the big one. And when we looked at at how much the 5 councils were spending on back office compared with revenue spend, it was around 19% in those 5 councils to begin with. We've reduced it to now 9%. This year it will go down to 7%. That is an enormous amount of savings on back office, and that's because of the efficiencies that you have, particularly in your management team, you're right the way through the organisation. The other thing I talked about was procurement savings, about 36 million we think, purely by going back and saying we're buying these services once, not 5 times, and you get a better deal. And that's how it is. We took a look very early on. We had 105 buildings that the 5 authorities either owned or rented across the county that they did, not that they did anything community, but they were just office buildings. And we decided very early on that this wasn't sustainable. We're now down at 3 main hubs. It's cost us 56 million to do it. They are very, very modern, up-to-date buildings, very good IT, very good telephony. People can work there, they can work at home, they can work in any of our libraries, our leisure centres, any offices all look the same with hot desking. We've gone to 1 desk for 3 members of staff. So we've completely changed the way we work. That has cost us 56 million, but the capital monies that we've got back is 86 million. So that's saved us in capital. But more importantly to me, because the things that pressurise me and you will be the revenue budgets, we're saved because they are modern, highly efficient buildings. We're saving 5 million a year in the running costs of our buildings, and that's been important. We've also had the opportunity now with Strategic to work with our partners, so the police, not just a front desk, but with their tear gas and their guns. They're in 2 of our main hubs, in Salisbury and in Chippenham. They share everything. We do all their IT for them. We do all their asset management for them. We have a really close relationship with the police, and the fire for Dorset and Wiltshire is in our Salisbury leisure campus. So all those strategic things we've been able to do. For councillors, we've gone down from 250 to 98. Interestingly enough, the Boundaries Commission have just come in and said 98's right, and we're sticking at the same. We've argued the case. They say fine. But the most important thing, and I'll tell you a little story in a minute, the most important thing is about joining teams that work together. Very early on, I had a girl called Sarah walked in. She was responsible for our safeguarding team, and she came into my office soon after we became a unitary, and I said, "Yeah, Sarah." She said, "I've just popped in, Jane, to say to you, thank you so much. You can't imagine the amount of time you have released for my staff having one authority." And she was children's safeguarding, and I never even thought that they were even connected, but she had to do quite a lot with the districts and the county together. So very early on, we would go back to one organisation. It is a different organisation. It has to, in my opinion, has to be a different organisation. So we spent a lot of time in those first few years, couple of years, spending hours and hours and hours with our officer teams from the top to the very bottom, working out a framework for new values, new behaviours and a new culture. And we are not anything like any one of the 5. We took the best from the 5, but we actually are a completely different council now than we were. I'll leave these with you, but you can see the recurring savings and where we've got to at the moment. After it's nearly 10 years, we're at 176 million. But I'll leave that all these with you. So, okay. Right. I'm sorry, am I taking too long? I can talk forever on this. I talked about being a large, strategic, efficient, effective organisation at the top, but one of the things that has absolutely made this work has been establishing our area boards. 18 of them in the county. There was a piece of work done in the late 80s which said these are the natural communities of Wiltshire. There's a book about it. They're basically the market towns with their rural hinterland. What we did was made them have executive powers through the leader and the executive, and they have devolved funding, and they have devolved services, and those are growing, and they will continue to grow as they mature. So what we give them will grow. It costs us about £1 million a year to manage. That is because we have a community manager in each one, but that is all. And their job is really to work with the local members and the community to bring it all together. We also give grants around 700,000 in capital every year. It used to be revenue, can't afford it anymore, but it's and that they can use for local grants. And what we're doing at the moment is making sure that they do that they give those grants for the priorities for the council, which is quite wide, but it just stops them doing anything that's not, it doesn't add value. But that's not the important bit. We've also been able to put all our youth activities through them, so all the budgets for youth have gone through now into community areas. We think that communities and local councillors understand better what young people want in a particular area, because it might be different in Salisbury City to it might be in rural Malmesbury. So it's up to them to decide on those. We have a highways budget for small highways projects, things like drop curbs. It may be as big as a zebra crossing, but they get the money and they work with their town and parishes locally on a committee called the CAT-G, and I can't remember what it calls, but they sit down on a regular basis, look at the money they've got, and together they prioritise those projects. That has worked so well because it always used to be a bun fight every year about who got it and who didn't get it. Now it's up to communities. They decide how they should spend that money. We were older people. We've given the money to look at older people's services, particularly about bringing together and making sure older people know what's available in those communities, so they have some money to do that. And we're just considering in this budget giving them the monies that go into a lot of the voluntary organisations and letting them choose how they fund those as well. And we will continue to look at things that they might like to do. The other thing that we've make it very clear that the only way we consult with people is through those area boards, so that people in Wiltshire know that if we're consulting on a waste strategy, a parking strategy, I don't know, a recycling strategy, if they want to get involved, they come to their area board. So sometimes you'll have 40 or 50, sometimes you'll have 200. And it can be, it depends what's on the agenda and whether it's interesting or not. And the voting on that is through the unitary councillors, although we do encourage all chairmen of area boards to ask the community their views first before the unitary councillors make their vote, because it's a brave unitary councillor that votes against their community, I would say. And I've seen that in action at times, and it's not pretty. But this is all about empowering and supporting and helping. This is the way you get communities to actually take some control. As I say, I think we've managed the central government funding. It's not been easy. It's tough, isn't it? I mean, it's tough. I'm just looking at a budget saving another 29 million this year, but I don't think we've had to make those difficult decisions. We promised the people of Wiltshire that we would freeze council tax for as long as we possibly can. We felt that it was right to say, if we're going to save some money, you should get something back from it. And I've stuck to that. And interestingly, I stuck to that until they said to me, enough, Jane. And we go out every year, talk to the communities and through the area boards about the budget. And they were beginning to say, no, thank you very much for everything you're doing. Now can you put it up? And last year was the first time we put it up. But that came back from the communities. And we had no problem with anybody about doing that. The customer satisfaction has gone up incredibly. People, don't moan about us. They seem to be quite happy with us. Interestingly, our MPs don't ever come and moan at us. They're very happy with us, which is very interesting. Because all they want is not too many people coming to their surgeries moaning about local services. And if we can keep those stable in a difficult time, they seem to be reasonably happy. They certainly wouldn't go back. Can I also say that I had on my cabinet 2 district leaders. One is now since retired. No, they were both retired. And, there's no problem within the council now. I don't think anybody would go back. It's difficult to begin with, but I don't think they would go back. I don't know about how you're parished, but we are totally parished in. Apart from the city of Salisbury was not parished. It ran under alderman from the district council. And when we set up the unitary, we also created a Salisbury City Council. The best thing we've ever done. So the city now has its own council. It is a parish council, but they are taking on more and more. It's been a huge success for the city. It was wrong that they didn't have. And of course, we continue with this long-term vision and a plan. Right, nearly there. Waste is one of the things that you would find quite difficult, because we had 4 waste systems. It's taken us a long time to get that harmonised, and it can be quite hard to explain to people if they've had a very big bin and because the other 3 districts had a smaller bin, you're going down to a smaller bin. There's quite a lot that needs to be done on that. We did nothing for 2 years. We made a clear decision. We would transition, get everything right, and then we'd look at transformation. And these sorts of things, yes, they are difficult. They are difficult with the community, but you have to explain it to them, have a good business case, and slowly you will do it. We had 1 that was outsourced, which made it even more difficult, and 3 that were in-house. So the whole thing was a bit messy, but it's done. Planning services is the other one that people are quite concerned about. I took a pragmatic view and said, keep your planning committees in your areas. And we kept them, and we've still got them in those. I don't talk about district areas, I talk geographic areas. So we've got 1 north, south, east, and west. They stay. Many times they don't do any business and they're cancelled because it's, there's so much planning now is through delegated powers if you have the right connections with your local members. But we did. We had 3 local plans that were agreed. 1 that wasn't. It was halfway through in Salisbury. We finished that local plan, and then we did a strategic plan for the whole of the county. That finished about 18 months, 2 years ago. It took forever. And we're on the second, we're now updating that. So we now have 1 local plan. So we could go down to 1 planning committee, development control committee, but I don't think that's right. I think local people like to get to their planning committee. Planning can cause people a lot of aggravation, and just for the sake of that, we've kept them. And then we have a strategic planning committee county-wide. I think there's a lot of concern about planning, but I think it can be done very easily. We've also embraced neighbourhood plans. and given, because we're such a big authority, we've been able to have the capacity to help town and parishes with neighbourhood plans, and I think we've got more neighbourhood plans in place than any other county, and we're really pushing ahead with that. And what interests me is there's more houses being built than we had planned, because people actually want sustainability in their communities. So we've found neighbourhood planning a positive thing, very much so. I mean, we are more efficient. Our council builds buildings, which is helping us to meet all government targets. We have a very different workforce. Our workforce now can work from home. As I say, it can work from any of our buildings, community buildings, leisure centres, libraries, anywhere. And the police have exactly the same IT as us. So if I look at a policeman's iPad or his phone, when he turns it on, it will say Wiltshire County Council, where everybody matters, which I find really nice, and poke them occasionally and say, look at that. But no, and that's helped them because they weren't compliant, and so when we were changing ours, we changed theirs at the same time, saved a lot of, not money for us, but public money, which is important. The devolution to town and parishes was another thing that we put in our submission, and we have done a lot of that, not as much as I'd hoped, because it is highly complex, and when the lawyers get involved, there's all sorts of, sort of things put in places about, can you give this piece of land or this toilet to them? But all our toilets have gone down to our public toilets have gone down to our town and parishes. The city of Salisbury had a very large, we gave them a lot to begin with, but about a £3 million package. Some of it will bring them in some income, some of it's going to cost them. But at least they're in charge of keeping their city clean now, and that suits me. We're now looking at all our play areas. I don't think Wiltshire Council needs to be responsible for play areas. I think that should be with the local towns and parishes. Same with things like cemeteries and what have you. So we're looking at everything that we possibly can. With the bigger towns, we're doing big deals, but with the villages, we're willing just to do individual deals on whatever they want to take on, and they are embracing that. They like that. So, as I say, I'm not going to go on to chief executive. I feel embarrassed. But we haven't got a chief executive, and that was very personal to Wiltshire, I think. Okay, right. Just about our, we suddenly took on leisure centres, joining with the libraries, and we've looked at had a new programme of investment. When we looked at how much needed investing in the leisure centres, some of them were reasonable, some of them were dreadful. We needed to invest about 127 million over 15 years just to keep them as they were. What we've done is said no. So we've been looking at our major towns and putting our libraries, our leisure centres, our community centres all into one place. And we've spent about 80 million on it, but it has been worthwhile. We're leaving a legacy of brand new, very efficient leisure and library centres, and putting library into leisure centres has made a huge difference of footfall for both, and that we're now looking at how that might be managed. It's still in-house, but I think there is an opportunity to take it now it's there, out of house, and particularly around the savings from NNDR, which will be another large saving for us, and keeping those things going into them. We have got big strategic partnerships with the police, as I said, and we've managed to move the police in Salisbury into our building, which actually released the police station, which is a very nice building, to make it into a university technical college. These are the opportunities you have to look strategically. I've talked about army basing. We're working with Cabinet Office on one public estate, and about 700,000 we've had from Cabinet Office looking at all the public land we have, because we've got a lot particularly because of the MOD, and that's meaning now that we can look at the estate for local health services particularly, and because they are not the best. and to make sure that together we can upgrade those. So a lot of it, of this strategic working, is not about what helps the council necessarily, it's what actually helps the people to give them proper, good public services. Libraries, we kept going. We have now, I think, 6,000 volunteers in the libraries, and we've kept them all open, and we've built new ones, and it's been a huge success. We do quite a lot with refugees. I think we've got more refugees, Syrian refugees, in the county than any other county. So all these things that we've been able to do that I don't think we would have done with the pressures that we might have had as a county council. We haven't talked about reserves, but one of our pressures was, I mean, we still run on 12 million reserves, on nearly £1 billion gross budget. We are teetering. And when we went to unitary, we had to pay for it ourselves, so we started our unitary council basically with no reserves. We had to literally open everything and put it in because we had no money and government wouldn't give us any money. So for us, you know, we are not a wealthy county by any means. Right. I think we've been lucky with our local enterprise partnership. We are just with Wiltshire and Swindon, and we are both unitary authorities. So it's very small. It can be very strategic, and it can be very, you know, it can't be a talking shop because there's only the private sector, the leader of Swindon, and myself, and so it's quite a tight LEP, and it's delivering, which is good. We've had a 15% increase in jobs, and we've kept businesses in mainly because of the planning issues and the strategic issues, and the ability to be able to have the capacity to have a really strong economic development team working with the LEP. That has made big changes. So things like we have a very good company that does green energy called Good Energy. Funnily enough, they're actually in our building. We had a spare floor in our building. We've kept them in the county. They were going to leave, and we've kept them in the county by working closely with them and actually offering them space to do it. So that's good. We've got businesses like you've got businesses, but businesses are growing, particularly in the north with Dyson. Done a lot of work with him, and the Unitary Authority was very much involved in him getting his new site and taking over Lavington Airfield. We did all the negotiations with London with him. I don't think we would have done that if we hadn't have been the authority we are. Similar thing with Boeing and down at Boscombe Down. Our superfast forward band, these are all things that you're doing, I'm sure, but we found it quite easy. Right, lessons that we've learnt. There are financial imperatives to drive the change, but I would argue there's also other imperatives. There's imperatives about actually delivering, not thinking about councils and people, but thinking about communities and the people that you actually serve. To me, that's the most important thing. And working your way through what is the best way to deliver all public services, including the partnerships with the other, but with health, police, fire. It's what is the best way and the most efficient way to deliver the best services to those people. I think that, to me, was much more of an important thing, because I think the money follows when you do that. I think it was really important for us, and anybody, I think, if I see the other bids, you need a clear vision, and not a vision that it goes to 120 pages, but goes to 4 or 5 pages, if you're going to do it, that actually, doesn't frighten people. Something that's clear to go out and talk to people about. Sorry, I've lost mine now. Beg your pardon. So, I think before you do anything, it's also about going and talking to people about your ideas. I know that's difficult when people are naturally anti, But I think, you know, to talk through, not at a time when you've got to make the decision, but at a time just when you're talking about what are the options and what are the ideas. I think it's really good to get that early support to do that. The bit about early wins, I think our early wins were probably council tax for the people in Wiltshire. That was what really, you know, made a difference to them, you know, what they could see. But I think it's more to me about the transition phase, is to have a very clear phase. Don't try and transform everything all at once. Because the one thing that worried me on the day that we became a unitary was that the bins wouldn't be picked up. You know, it's as simple as that, or a child would not get it, you know, get the services they required. So I think for me it's about making sure that you go through that transition phase, and when you feel confidence, then you look for transformation. So, and it takes time. You know, it really takes time to get that new culture, to get those new behaviours, to change your council. You know, this is about, for me, for Wiltshire Council, was for about the next 50 to 100 years. It's not about the next 2 years. And I think if you can look at it that way, I think you don't take silly decisions very quickly. We're talking about MPs. I did talk to them. They didn't like me much. But, you know, I took the view very early on as a leader, and so did many of my councillors, not all, but many of them, that actually it wasn't about politics, it wasn't about government, it was about us as local councillors doing the right thing with the right evidence for local people, as simple as that. And we came to the conclusion when we'd done the work that the best thing was to go for a unitary. If you do decide to do, I did find it quite, I was working with a Secretary of State who was a Labour Secretary of State. I'm still very friendly with him. He's not an MP anymore, but I'm still very friendly with him because we had good conversations. And if you can get good conversations with the government, I think that helps as well. Talk to people, communicate all the time, both if you want to do it before you make the decision, when you make the decision about what it's going to be like, and then don't stop afterwards, keep communicating, because I think that's the way that you keep people on board. And it's an opportunity to build a team, a great team with, you know, a modern team for local government. You know, we also brought in some great people who had the skills to do the change management in the first year or two. In fact, we increased our management levels as a single authority, really just to get it right. Don't try and take the money out too quickly, and get the right people in to do the job. I've talked a lot about communication. It's very, very important. Interesting, we had the BBC on our side, our local BBC, and he still talks about it now on the BBC. Well, of course, Wiltshire is not having to do what Somerset's having to do because they're a unitary authority. It was quite interesting. We brought them in. They saw it warts and all, and they've been very supportive of us. Say I've talked about capacity. Obviously, this has all got to have a clear business plan. That's, you know, anything should. And evidence is really important. You know, just talking about things without evidence doesn't work at all. And I think any council now that's thinking of doing it should be thinking about not just its council, but how this impacts on other public services and their relationship with other public services and the opportunity with other public services as well. Where are we going now? We continue really to move on. We do need another. Have we gone on to this? I don't know where I'm now. Right. We still don't stop changing. I think it's important not to just sit down and say that's it. The big thing now is that we intend to be a very digital council very quickly. We've realised what people are saying to us is, that's all right, you've moved us, you have done, Jane, but actually we want to access you 24 hours a day like we do our banks and Amazon, etc. We want to do all our business online. So a lot of that is going on. A lot of our boring back office services being done by robotics or whatever. I don't understand that. It's time for me to give up, I think. But we just have to keep moving forward. But it does give you the opportunity to do that. I am happy to answer any questions whatsoever.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that's taken so long, but
Yep.
There's an awful lot to say.
Thank you for going through that in such detail. I'm sure members are going to have some questions if you're happy to take those. Nick, did you want to add anything before I open?
Just briefly, I have one question for Jane, but before we start off, can I thank her personally for what I thought was an excellent presentation? Can I say to Jane that when we started off with this on this journey, I described it as a noble purpose. It is not political. It is a noble purpose to hopefully achieve what you're achieving. I can see key things that she's mentioned today, which we obviously have to develop. We do need a clear vision, as Jane says. We do need to develop a business case. And I think one of the important things, and I think it was Brenda that mentioned it in our pre-meeting, is we do need to develop and show what these area boards are going to do, because I think that is absolutely crucial to members to develop that. I understand what you're saying about transition. That's not, whatever we do, we can't just rush into it. The key thing that the bin has got to be picked up tomorrow, irrespective of where you are, is a key thing. Obviously, working with partners and strategic partners and getting them on side again is crucial. But my one question to Jane, and it is slightly controversial, is if she was in my position today, would you think that an improved status quo, which is what districts are saying to me, could achieve what you've achieved? And then I'll leave it, Chairman.
Sorry. My honest opinion is no. I tried it. I tried really hard for a number of years and I had good relationships as leader with the district's councils, and we did good business. Sadly, I think because we all have our own pressures and our own statuses, that it went so far and couldn't go any further. And I do think that the processes that we go through, whether it's about plannings, economic development, how we deal with waste, which are sort of connected between the two types of organisation, I don't think it works unless it's one unitary authority. I feel quite strongly about that. And that's my honest opinion.
Okay, well, let's open it up to some questions. Can I just start with this? You said about you operate from 3 main centres. So does that mean that actually there is still large areas of the county, if that's what you call it, that are people considerable distance away from one of those centres? Do you not have, what do you have below those hubs that people can access services? And you explained about these 18 boards. What's the relationship with the boards to the cabinet? So presumably they've got to work within the framework and the policies. Can things get referred up or called in by the cabinet if they're not happy with something that a board's doing? And how do you presumably you're a Conservative administration. Presumably you have to accept these boards might want to do something different if there's a different political. Do you tolerate that, or do you intervene and tell them they can't?
Buildings. I mean, there would have been 5 buildings. There's now 3. Interesting. One of them is 2 of them are the district council buildings, upgraded. We would have had a 3rd, and that would have been in Devizes, which was the Kennet District Council area. But because by the time we got to doing that and we had plans to upgrade it, that we had far less staff, we just didn't need it. We just didn't need it. That's why we've got the three. We've got one in the middle, which is Trowbridge, but we wouldn't have had another one in Trowbridge, which we closed the district council office there because it was literally a few hundred yards away from County Hall. So where do people access us? In the major towns, there are hubs. For example, in Devizes there is hubs. They can access us through our libraries, through our leisure centres. All of them are connected through, through to County Hall. So we've had no issues about people actually accessing our services at all. On our area boards, they are constituted as being under the executive, the leader and executive. That gives them executive powers within the policies and within the budgets of that area. So let me give you an example. Malmesbury had big problems with flooding. So they actually had in their budget for the library to be upgraded. They were due to have curtains, carpets, etc. in the library. That area board decided no, it would not spend that money on that in that community. It would actually spend money on flood alleviation in that year. It can make those decisions. I don't mind. It's a community. It can decide what it wants to do. If it decided that it was going to change the policy of how to access adult care services, that's a no-no. You can't change the policy, but you can, and they do spend, look at the spend in their communities, as they will do, looking at quite a lot of highway stuff. They will make those decisions on their priorities. The members of the area boards are as those community councillors in that, unitary councillors in that area. Some areas are chaired by and they decide on their chair, and some areas are chaired by opposition. If they're in the majority, then the chances are that they will be the chairing. That's fine with me. Doesn't matter.
Okay, that's helpful to understand that. Right, I've got a number of members that wish to comment. I've got Kevin first.
Thank you, Chairman. That was very, very helpful, Jane. It really was. It's filled in quite a lot of the queries and issues that I was imagining might come up. And I mean, you've gone through it in a very clear way. And made a good selling job, really. It was interesting that you were talking about 18 towns, and I've been writing down a list here of how many we might be able to make out of it, because we're very much more rural. I appreciate you've got Salisbury Plain, but we have great tracts on the eastern side, Melton and the Harbour areas, which are tiny, tiny hamlets, really, small villages. And I've managed to get to 13, and I'm really struggling. But yeah, I'm sure we can work something on that. I think
we had actually 20 community areas, and because of our rurality, we've had to put two lots together into one. You have to look at it pragmatically and work with your local councillors about what is the best way to do it.
That's fine. The question I was really coming to was, as you know, we went through right at the start of this meeting, we haven't really got support from any of our MPs. And my question therefore is really related to that is, obviously you had to build up something, but did you get a positive reaction initially, or was it similar to here, sort of a relatively negative one?
No, negative. We had at the time we had 4 MPs. We've now got 5, and one of them wasn't anti. The other were absolutely anti. Really, really, not very pleasant about it. But I don't think they'd say that now. My personal opinion on this is I think MPs need to talk to other MPs that have been through it. I mean, that's what, before they start, being totally against, they just need to do the work that you will all do to decide whether it's right or wrong, rather than saying it's wrong in the first place. I think you need the evidence to say right or wrong.
So I can hear echoes of some of the comments that's been received here. Yeah. Right, can we have Trevor Pendleton there?
Thank you, Chairman. Jane, I'm fascinated on the planning side, as those who know me will know. You mentioned you had 5 planning through committees through the boroughs and districts. We've got 7 at the moment, and it's just how. Can you tell me, 10 years on, is there any pressure? Because you said we kept the planning exactly as it was. Why fix something that isn't broke? Okay, so you kept that. Can you tell me, just gloss a little bit about the strategic level and what that gives you, being totally joined up now, and also how planning works with the area boards? Does it, or where does that fit? Because I'm hearing area boards, and I think they're going to be quite crucial for us to consider in our model. So I'm interested in that. Thank you.
We had 4 district what they call development control. They now call them development management or something. I'm not a great planner. I see things more strategically. But we had four district planning committees and the 1 county strategic, which dealt with the bigger things in the past. I just think it's planning committees are so important to local members and local communities that the view I took the pragmatic view: why change those? Why leave them? There was also the issue in the first place that it would have been complex to put them into one, because wherever you lived it would depend on which local plan you were involved in. All right, so the districts all had local plans, and to begin with, until we got a county-wide plan, that was the planning guidance they had to work to. Does that make sense? So we didn't change it to begin with, and now, I mean, it comes up as savings quite often, and I have a view that local people like to know where they can get and talk about their planning issues. On those planning committees, they're obviously politically proportionate, and we encourage the group leaders to make sure that the members on those planning committees are reasonably local members. Sometimes it's more difficult if there's no one particular opposition party, but most of the time they are local people, and so they really haven't changed. And I just pragmatically don't see the point. Area boards, absolutely not. The one thing that we've kept out of it is planning, because they would take them over, and there's planning committees to do that. And interestingly enough, before we went to a unitary, 1 or 2 of the district councils had started sort of area committees, and they had put planning in them, and they were not very successful, because what was happening is the whole of the meeting would be about planning, and actually the big things about communities and other pressures and other priorities were being forgotten. One of the things we've done with our area boards, interestingly enough, is to begin with, all they wanted to talk about was potholes and highways. You know, it's a big issue in Wiltshire, potholes, as I expect. Is it for you? So very popular. And it was always highways related. And so we realised we had to do something about that. So what we did was we took our JSNA, which Public Health provides, which is our joint strategic needs assessment, which says everything that's happening, and how good we made it bigger, we made it environmental, we made it economic, as well as about health and well-being. And then we split it into the community areas. And then we took them once every year to them. So they then could say, Bradford-on-Avon, why have I got more childhood obesity than my next door town? That started communities to think about, actually there was more things than just potholes. There was actually things about their communities that they'd now got evidence about, and actually they could do something about it. Bradford-on-Avon was an interesting one because it did have more childhood obesity, and it's done a huge amount, and it was beginning to go up. It's now plateaued, and it's just beginning to come down. This is communities knowing, they have to know what the issues are, and then allowing them to work on it with your support. worked.
Thank you. All right, Trevor? Thank you. Yeah. Just a quick one on that. Do you have a 5-year housing supply?
Yes.
Did you have before? Well, I suppose you didn't know because it's only come in.
No. No, we didn't. We've had to work on it, but we have now,
Okay.
which has kept some of those developers at bay.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? Okay. Rosita.
Yes, thank you again. Just going back to stronger, resilient community, you said that parishes will have more responsibility. So I assume they will be key in delivering that strong, resilient community. So how did your parishes embrace that? Because at the end of the day, they're all volunteers and you do get some resistance. So just talk me through the parishes' issues on.
The things on the parishes. I think you in Wiltshire, you look at parishes are very different. You go from the city of Salisbury and the market towns right down to some of our parishes only just have one parish meeting a year. They don't have parish councils. They are that small. So you have to work with them differently. And I think you have to be open to anything they want to come and talk to you about, because even some of the smallest parishes will come and talk to you about perhaps taking over the grass cutting of one of our pieces of grass at the same time as theirs, because they think they can do it more efficiently and they can do it all at the same time. So you've got to be open to that, and you've got to have the capacity to deal with that. When you get to the bigger ones, then you're talking about quite big negotiations about what pieces of land, what assets might be in that town that we've got, that we actually, why is it not to them? They may actually bring them in some income, but then, then it's a negotiation about, well, if you're doing that, why don't you start to do some more of the town centre cleaning, the waste in the town centre, and you come to a negotiation, and that's what we've done on 1 or 2 towns, including the big one in Salisbury City. The interesting thing that we had quite a lot of negotiation with the town and parish councils was about area boards, because quite rightly they need to be a clear part of it. And they need to be, involved completely, because if not, you can't deliver what you need to deliver. We had a lot of discussion about their role, and it got quite legal in the end, because I was very happy for them to vote, but our lawyers weren't. Because if we wanted the areas boards not to be talking shops, we wanted them to have powers, and once they had powers, particularly over any budget, then it could only be the unitary councillors that could make the decisions. So that call got a bit messy to begin with, the truth, and we had to talk to them about that. But I thought it was worth sticking out and saying, no, they can't be just talking shops. They've got to have responsibilities. So therefore, no, you can't vote, but actually you are key to being there. So they get all the agendas, the minutes. They get more time. They're encouraged to speak. They're encouraged to give reports on what's happening in their communities. And we move the area boards around the towns and parishes in that community. So we won't always have it in one hall. We'll go around the village halls. We'll make sure that we have a presence in the villages as well, particularly. So, yeah, there's.
They embraced it, and
well, not to begin with. Not to begin with. That takes negotiation. It's a change for them. It's a time, but they embrace it now. They're very involved now. Each parish council. I don't know a parish council that doesn't have one member that goes to the area boards, and they always report back on their parish and town councils of what's happened at the area boards, and they're very involved in the transport groups, because they see their small schemes that never sort of ever got onto a list county-wide are beginning now to be discussed and prioritised, and so they're very happy about that, very happy.
David Bill.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, it's great to hear about such attractive places that we regard as places we like to visit. Bradford-on-Avon, and Malmesbury, and even Salisbury, of course, which we hope is it is lovely, and I think we all want to see it recover and play its part in once again as it should. Could I just go back to a point that that Trevor raised about planning committees, and you talked about how important they are. It's just an observation. My experience over the last 2 or 3 years is that planning committees are now so weakened that it's almost as if they've lost the confidence of people, because what's happening, of course, is that so much power has now been transferred to the planning inspectorate, and we're finding planning decisions imposed upon us, and we're being forced to take planning decisions that we do not want to take. We oppose them, but they are taken anyway, and we're facing massive developments which are going to be part of some kind of national picture, and we will only have a say. So I don't know whether you strategic, yes. Now I don't know whether your experience has been that you have more of a say, or whether you've got the same situation. So that's one point. Whether you've got whether you are able to have a stronger voice in major planning decisions.
I don't think so. No, I think we're all controlled by central government eventually, and by the planning inspectorate, and I just think that's how it is with a government, or any government, wanting to build houses, more houses than sometimes our local residents want. What I will say is that it's been easier to more strategically plan the county. So whereas when we had the four districts, they all had to take their bit of housing and economic development land, and sometimes, you know, one district is probably not that they'd taken too much, and it would have been better if their bit had been passed over to another district. We've been able to look at our county very, very strategically, and we have 3 major centres. We have Chippenham, which will grow because it's on a main line to London. You'll be able to get into the city within it once they've electrified it, which they will in the next few years, into the city of London in an hour and 10 minutes. That makes it almost commuter land for London, and with the pressures on London. So you've got Chippenham, it's also on the M4 corridor, which makes it very accessible. You then got Trowbridge, which is our county town right in the centre, has a number of satellite towns around it, which is very high GVA, and Salisbury, in the city of Salisbury, which of course is very much connected to the A303, to Boscombe Down, to Porton Down, and all the development around there. So what we've been able to do as a single planning authority is to be able to manage where those houses should be and where that economic development land should be, with the relevant infrastructure and the correct infrastructure. So we haven't been forced down too many very local decisions in some of our smaller towns. I think that's what I'd say about that. Yeah, do come back.
Yes, okay. Could I just go on to a different subject? And that is, as a local member, I'm very, very much aware that the agencies that we have to deal with are not particularly accountable. You eventually get through if you're lucky, but there's no formal accountability or scrutiny that is evident. For example, the Highways Agency. I don't know whether we have problems really in actually getting any sense out of the Highways Agency, or Severn Trent. I don't know whether Severn.
No, we're on Severn Trent.
You're not. No, but whether you have any, whether you can actually get.
I think we all.
Yeah,
go on.
Yeah, well, and lastly, the NHS, of course, which is the big one.
Yeah.
Because we realise that the NHS is under tremendous pressure and is probably receiving. It's going to receive funds, but to try to sort of to try to get them to really be open with us is difficult. I'm just wondering whether your experience with these agencies has improved, having gone over to your new system.
think they listen a bit more. People like the Highways England, it is now, isn't it? Not the Highways Agency, Highways England now. They listen a bit more. Perhaps we have a little bit more sort of, a little bit more push at them. The health service, well, yeah, but that takes time, but they do work very closely with us. They do. We are lucky. We have one council and one CCG. It's not complex. You know, we meet regularly. I meet with them almost weekly. My cabinet member is probably with the NHS. I mean, he even chairs the STP now. You know, we have that closeness. Our health and wellbeing board has been extremely, extremely challenging to them. Is very. It gets things done. We have on that, we have 3 acute hospitals. 2 of them are out of the county, one's in the county. Those 3 come to every single one of our health and wellbeing boards. We have a very close relationship with them. Whether that's because it's a unitary or whether that would have been the same as a county council, who knows? All they'll say to me is it's a lot easier here, Jane, because it's you and it's us. And, you know, there is that close relationship. Same with the police. There's them and us, you know, and if there's anything to be said, we have a very, very close relationship with them. You know, it's almost as if we try and become just one local public service in the county, because I think that's what people want. And that's not to say we don't have arguments, we do. But I think it probably is less complicated and simpler. That's what I'll say.
Terry Richardson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Jane, for a very interesting presentation. If I've understood what you've said correctly, I think one of the biggest changes you've had to make is to effectively put members at the heart of everything. So members now run the council. You've enfranchised backbenchers in terms of area committees, etc. So, and from what you're saying, you're probably pretty much there full-time yourself if you're meeting with people every week. So what has been the major difference to a councillor in terms of time they need to spend, commitment, how you've professionalised them, and have you had to take that bold step of almost making some of your councillors full-time, inverted commas, to do that job effectively?
I'm very passionate about community leadership. I think it seems to have gone off the agenda in the last few years. It used to be really important, and I think is important. So I think all councils will have different levels of engagement by councillors. That's absolutely necessary, because some councillors, and we need a wider selection of councillors. I've got quite a few young councillors. They've got a job to do as well. I've got other middle-aged councillors that also have a job to do. So I think that's the same in any council. But I believe that, and we made it work in Wiltshire, that the executive is full-time. I have a cabinet, but then I have a group of portfolio holders who work to the cabinet members almost like junior ministers. So they do all the, you know, a lot of the smaller committees, the smaller groups they bring back, and they can look at very specifics and in detail. They're not full-time, but they're in quite a lot of the time. You know, some of our major committee members are in quite a lot of the time as well. But then there's some councillors that literally want to work in their communities, and that's all they do. And we try and support them through area boards, through community area managers, to do that and do it well and have, you know, the support to do it. And that to me is very important. I think that's the first responsibility of any councillor, is to be their community leader. If you can help them do that, that's great. But when you've got any big council, then I think the leadership and particularly the executive, to think you can do it on a few days a week is not really possible, in my opinion.
Right, I've got Bill Bolter next.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just turn things around to the lowest level, do you know, 1 Anita, and that's social housing. Now, I don't know whether you kept any social housing within your council, or what did you do when you took over as a unitary, and how did you organise it then?
We, 3 of our district councils had sold out their social housing. The Salisbury District Council had retained it. They'd gone out about a year previously to the residents, and the residents had voted very strongly that they wanted it to be retained within the council. And so we've respected that, and we have a housing department, and we run our housing down in the south of the county. That housing department has been quite useful because it's also helped us deal with things like homelessness across the whole council. And it's also helping us now because we're considering building more housings that we will retain, social housing, that we will retain on our land, and that will go into the housing stock. But it won't go necessarily out to a housing association. So, you know, we're very happy. We're running a housing down in the south of the county, and, you know, it's working well. No problem at all.
So just pressing that a bit further, Jane, so that means you have a housing revenue account, and the recent announcements by the government about borrowing, they're going to lift those blocks and give you more flexibility. You're going to take advantage of that?
Absolutely am, yeah. We'll be building social housing to add to our stock, but it won't necessarily be down any longer in the south of the county. If we don't need it there, it may be in the north of the county. So, you know, that's given us the flexibility to do that. Yeah, very happy about that.
Okay, thanks for that clarity. Terry Einan.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Jane, for coming all the way from Wiltshire. And I think it's been a fascinating presentation. I'm a dual hatter, and the thing that my other colleagues, my district colleagues, and my colleagues in the community and the voluntary sector, they have a perception of this council as very centralising, and I think there is a historical truth to that. I think there has been a tendency to centralise our engagement with the communities and voluntary sector. We outsourced a lot of that work to Voluntary Action Leicestershire, and I think we've got them on later. And I think we're moving away from that with public health local area coordinators who work very much closely with communities. And what I'm interested then is, how do your area committees relate to, we have GP federations, so we've basically each district area is effectively a GP federation. So how do your area committees work with that grassroots level of the NHS?
I think the perception of your communities to your county council is the same as ours. It was centralised. The one thing that everybody said, well, everything will happen in Trowbridge. We won't see you. You'll all be in Trowbridge. You know, you have to, that's the bit you really have to work hard on. I know it's hard to work with the MPs, etc., and government, but the real people that you want on your side are the communities, because they're going to live with it after the decision's made, if you do make the decision, and you need them to be positive about it. So it's really hard. You've got to work with them. You've got to work with the voluntary sector really low down, and we're still giving quite large amounts of voluntary sector grants, which many councils have stopped, including grants to arts and heritage. We're still doing that. We've still managed to keep that going. But it does take a lot of work. You know, that's the bit that I would spend the most time in, and I did spend the most time in, is making sure that those people understood how it's going to work, and it's going to be different. It's not going to be a county council. It's going to be a unitary authority. It's not going to be a district council. You know, you've got to make sure that and get them to talk to you about what could be better for them and how you could make it different so it's better for them, because all that helps. As far as GPs are concerned, our area boards, that we always have somebody well, we always have an ongoing invite, and most of them do. The local GPs will come along to an area board, or somebody will from the practice, or they'll work, if there's more than one practice, they'll work it amongst them. As do we usually get somebody from Health Watch as well, listening to what the community has. And that's an opportunity for both the GPs and Health Watch, or the CCG if they want to actually update the communities quite locally on what's happening, because often it's about a particular facility or a dentist surgery or a small community hospital, and it's only that community that's really interested, and you can get into a lot of conversation. The police use it, so our PCC uses it as his way to communicate with the public, as do fire. And they will always have a standing agenda item if they want to speak and update anybody on anything that's going on. That's quite useful. People are very interested, and parish councils and town councils can take back all that information and spread it down the community that comes out at an area board, whether it's about health services, police, fire, or whatever else. So, yeah, there's a close connection.
Brenda?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a good presentation that's done what it's supposed to do. It's opened my mind, and it's asking me more questions than I started with, actually. Just thinking about you going round to the district leaders, MPs, strategic partners, and not having the best of receptions at the beginning. Did you have that 4-page clear vision then? So you did have that specific thing to sell at that time, and I feel as though that's what I am lacking at the moment. So do you advise us to have that clear decision, clear view, and that business plan first?
Ours was a very different process, because we were asked by the government whether we wanted to put in an expression of interest. So we had to have a full council meeting. Sorry, tell me if this is too much detail, but I think it gives you some context. We had to have a council meeting, and we had to ask the council to choose one of 3 options: to stay as a status quo, to work together with the districts on in a much in a much stronger way. I forget what it was called. There was a name, and a few councils did that, or to look at a unitary bid. We decided at that council meeting to look at the 2 options: closer working, which we're doing already, and unitary. In order for either of those to go forward, in order for the closer working with the districts to go forward, it had to have the districts to agree. So they had full council meetings, and actually 3 of them decided they didn't want to work any closer with us. So that knocked out. So we, as a full council, a county council, had the one option, and we very quickly worked on the vision. And so the MPs and the councils knew we were looking at it, but very quickly we got a vision so by the time we were going out and doing all these 250 odd meetings, we did have a clear vision about, but it was not worked up. It was a vision. It wasn't a whole business plan. It was a clear vision about what we wanted. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. So when was the business plan? When did that, after the decision or before the decision was made?
We'd made a decision to go to a business plan.
Right.
We then had to have another council meeting in order to look at the business plan and decide whether we would go forward to taking that forward as part of the bid to government to become one of the unitaries. And we did that. The council decided. I have to say it was a cross-party decision, which was quite interesting. It wasn't. It went through with the support of the opposition, and not all the support of the ruling group. And it went through, and that business plan then was our bid to government.
Thank you.
Okay. Alan Pearson.
Thank you for the presentation. It's Could you clarify a bit more in depth the geographical features, because we have them in Leicester, as you're aware, and that they are different. And you know, you had major economic hubs. We've got them. I think somebody else mentioned Melton, where we've got pretty isolated, and we're nearer to Grantham and Nottingham in a way. You've got the West, which is in a corridor, which is more likely to gain more industrial work, etc. So, and also the population. How's your population divided? How did you manage it? Because we've got, of course, a population divide in a bigger rural area. It'd be just interesting how you pulled that together.
It's an interesting question. We have a donut in Wiltshire.
So do we.
And what we've got in the middle is Salisbury Plain. And everything has to happen around the plain. So we have a major town, Chippenham, at the north, which is on the M4 corridor. And above that, in the rest of Wiltshire, is very small market towns, Malmesbury, Purton, Cricklade, places like that, who are quite affected by Swindon, which of course went unitary back in 1987. That 97 rather, and so they sort of affect that northern part of our borders. Then when you move further south, the centre of the town is a county is a place called Devizes, which is sort of north of the plain, but not very far north of the plain, and is a typical market town. But and has had some development, but not a great deal. And all the towns around there, Marlborough and places like that, again, not a lot of development, very, very traditional market towns, and don't impact greatly on the economy. Chippenham does, because of its closeness to the M4, but also its links into London, and is a growing town. Then you go to Trowbridge, and Trowbridge has a number of satellite market towns around it. Melksham, Westbury, Warminster. These were the ones that were very much controlled by the old type of low-value job economy. But they are beginning to now go above that and take over and grow. So there's a corridor there that the LEP is particularly interested in, which is around the A350, which is the town that is the road that goes from the West Midlands down to the ports, which is an extremely strategic route and where our towns are on. The third area, then you get to the plain where nothing happens apart from soldiers, and then you get, well, a lot happens, not relevant to us, and then you get down to the south, which is a really growing area along the A303 corridor, which of course is being graded hopefully with a tunnel by Stonehenge, because it's a strategic route into Devon and Cornwall. But around there you've also got the military coming in, and you've got Boscombe Down growing, and you've got Porton Down growing, which is where all the defence stuff happens. And of course, around there, what we've been able to do is to talk strategically, nationally, particularly with the MOD, about how we can grow that area, because they're very high-value jobs. And so that area is important for high-value jobs. So is the M4 corridor with Dyson for high-value jobs. And that has helped us because we can be very strategic. And from a county council that was taking money out of economic development, we've been able, have the capacity to add money into our economic development side, working closely with the LEP, which has made us far, far more strategic in our thinking about how we manage the whole of the county, not just individual areas, and how they all fit together as far as infrastructure is concerned.
Jonathan Morgan.
Thank you, Jane, for that. Very useful. Having spent 20-odd years working for various bits of the army down in Wiltshire, I have to say it's always good to hear place names coming flooding back and bringing back memories, many of which were good. And also having...
houses in Larkhill.
I won't even say where some of my projects were, but you probably don't want to know. It's always useful to actually get a feel for other places and the experiences that they've gone through, and also their back history and where they've come from. And I think there's a lot in your presentation that I think we can recognise from sort of shared potential experiences here in Leicestershire, but also differences as well. And some of those are actually just as important for measuring decisions as some of the others. I'm sort of interested because I know quite a lot of the councillors in Swindon quite well, and very interested to hear the relationship between you and Swindon, because obviously population-wise, I think Wiltshire's probably about 480 and Swindon's about 220, so 700,000 between the two of you. And obviously we have a similar sort of relationship with the city in the sense that we're about same sort of proportions. We're about 680 and they're about 320, 330 or something about that. And really just getting a feel for the relationship, because I know talking to some of the councillors in Swindon, they obviously have a relationship with Wiltshire, the neighbouring unitaries. You mentioned about they're established obviously 10 years before Wiltshire, a bit more, 12 years. And really just getting a feel for whether, because scale is quite interesting and it's come into conversations a lot today, and I think you've absolutely identified that it's not all about the money, it's also about sense of community and what feels right. And really just sort of getting a feel for whether you think actually in reality it would have been better off actually for Swindon and Wiltshire to have actually come together as a single unitary, given the benefits of scale and size and everything else, or whether you think that was actually the right decision not to. And then if I can have a follow-on from that, that would be useful.
I mean, Swindon left us in '97, and that's a divorce. You know, it's quite a big thing to happen. We then went for unitary not long after, in a way, in terms of local government, and so therefore it was never considered at all. It wouldn't have been right. It wasn't. The timing wasn't right. The whole thing wouldn't have worked. What has helped us do is to strengthen the relationship as we moved out of the difficult period when they left, and building back relations. And it's been about, we have the same fire authority, the same police authority, the same. We share a major hospital in Great Western Hospital, so much of what we do, the same LEP, is connected. And what we've just majored on is making sure that relationship works. They have very different issues to us, very different. I mean, they're a medium-sized town growing, and all the issues that they have with that, and we're not like that. There's obviously tensions at times. What we are now doing a lot of our strategic planning with them. So we have joint committees to do strategic planning. Housing areas now are connected with Swindon because that's sensible to do, and we talk all the time. So it's a good relationship now, but I don't think it would have been right to try have actually joined up at that time. I think that was a step too far. It would have taken our eye off what was important for the county of Wiltshire, and we stuck to that and didn't even consider it. Would we do it now? I don't know. I think it would have been worth looking at, but probably not. Probably not too complicated. They're proud of, they've got their own unitary authority up there with very clear vision, and I think we leave them to do that.
Just follow on in that case. Obviously, you talked about commonality between LEP areas, PCCs, etc. I mean, obviously, PCC came in subsequent to your unitarisation, so that's sort of changed environment. Quite a lot's happened in sort of almost the decade, I guess, since your creation. Just interesting, you're saying ongoing relationships. So as far as neighbouring authorities, because I mean, again, scale is interesting. There are obviously a lot more strategic matters that where actually a much larger scale is obviously quite important. But again, that sense of community, which you've touched on, is quite interesting as well. So really, you talked about the back office costs, for instance, coming down substantially, and I'm assuming some of those costs are actually about certain items being outsourced, and possibly, I mean, gender pay gap is quite an interesting thing where obviously outsourcing affects quite dramatically some of the gender pay gap issues, and I'm assuming on back office costs, maybe some of those might be the case, and whether there's a benefit of working with other authorities, even beyond, on reducing some of those back office costs even further.
Absolutely. We have very little outsourced back office, if anything. We haven't got anything. We you know, I'm a great believer in a mixed economy in local government. I've never been a leader who wants you know, a commissioned council, or you know, I think we should look at everything, and you should take a business case on everything and make a decision. And it's a mixed economy, so waste is outsourced, but you know, most of the back office is still in house. We continue. We are a county like you. We're surrounded by 9 other authorities. We talk to them all regularly. We'll do business with them when it's right for both of us, if we do business with them. So we're looking at school support, for example. You know, is that with Gloucestershire and Somerset? Is that right to do that? Our STP now is across Swindon, Baines, Bath and East, North East Somerset, and ourselves. So obviously we're going to do a lot more about adult care, particularly on that. We do, as I say, we do a lot of work with Swindon and join with them on quite a bit of the planning side and economic development side. So we'll do business with whoever it's good to do business with, and we'll outsource with whoever if they give us a better deal. But you know, they have to give us a better deal. So, and it has to be on a business case footing.
Okay, thanks for that.
Rather than a principle.
I've got Dan Harrison, and then everyone has had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a bit late to say good morning, James, because we met in the car park and guided you through the building. The impressive thing to me today is the quote that you made earlier on in the morning was, it's not about the money altogether. Now, I've absolutely impressed with this idea of community, because I'm old style. I believe in community and working with the community and trying to understand their needs and interpret it and bring it back to another system. And you pushed in one end of the sausage machine and hope it comes out perfect the other, but that's not always so. So I think that is absolutely, really quite eye-opening, the benefits. And personally, I never quite latched on how important that organisation can be as a single body, transcending down into the population in a way that you've described it this morning. I had a little vision, and obviously the pot of money was my first thought, but now you're opening up a total different door and a whole different new scenario where people are more joined up and more working together. I think that's amazing. Thank you.
I think it's interesting. I feel absolutely passionate about communities and community leadership and the role of local authorities in all that governance in the communities. But interestingly enough, if you do that right, then the money will follow, because you should have, if you know, a stronger community who's doing a little bit more for itself with a little less support from you, but a lot more support probably from the voluntary sector, the third sector, but also from other people in its community. And I don't just look at communities as about geographical communities, it's also about communities of like-minded people. So it's how do you support communities of carers, of looked after children in a better way. You know, I've just brought in a whole new model of support for our looked after children on the back of the fact that we quite rightly have to look after them to 25. You know, I looked after my own children way past 25, and here we go. You know, so I think I think we have to look at it holistically, but I don't think it's separate from the money. I actually think it's part of, you know, the way you do things in order to make the system work better for you, financially as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, Terry, you'd indicated you wanted to come back. Can you be brief? Because we do need to move on.
Very brief. Two disparate questions, if I may, Jane, which I forgot to ask earlier because I was trying to let others speak. You mentioned earlier that you had done deals with some of the parish councils. You did a £3 million deal with Salisbury. So what I'm interested in is how much financial support have you provided to, let's call it the third tier for us at the moment, in terms of providing finance for them to take on services, and how much ongoing support do you provide, if any? And my second question, completely disparate, there is a cost to democracy, which I think sometimes, you know, the public don't accept, but you can't ignore. Now, looking at your level of allowances and the way you fund things, were we to adopt a similar system, even with the reduction that we're looking at in the number of councillors, the actual cost of overall would go up, whereas we're showing a saving of 200,000 in our figures, which doesn't exist based on a model such as yours. So I just wonder, did you save money on allowances, or did you not, or did you, over a period of time, the cost of democracy for the community you wanted become an acceptable cost?
No, the way we've done it with bigger places like Salisbury is that we've done a deal with them where some of what assets they've been given have been assets that you can get revenue from. So we've done it that way. We haven't actually given them any money, and we haven't given any support. We haven't had it, you know. And it's been a difficult conversation sometimes about, you know, a lot of town, well, you know, this is double taxation but I've just been blunt and said, look, you know, the reality of local government financing is that we either you do some of it with us, or we don't do it because we can't afford it. And actually, if you can precept, you have no, as a town and parish, you have no cap. And it's very easy for you to say to your community, we want to put it up, you know, a pound a month or something, but actually what you're getting is this, and this, than it is for a strategic authority to do it. We've had those conversations. Sometimes they've been difficult, but now we have a strong working relationship with them. As far as costs, we went down to 98 from 250 something councillors. We've saved a little bit, not a lot, because I think our basic is 12 something for each councillor, and then, you know, the special responsibility allowances on top. No, there's not a huge saving in that, but there is a saving. And actually people out there quite like that.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Nick, do you want to just say something before I close this session?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I think it's been very, very good and very informative. Just three quick questions to Jane. Has the relationship with the PCC and the Police Commissioner, Jonathan mentioned it, has that improved? We have a great relationship with our LEP, as it happens, because we're coterminous with the county and the city. Has the relationship with the LEP improved? And one of the opportunities, real opportunities, which I'd like a little bit of comment on, and I think we've got here, is the combining of social care and social housing. As you said, my district, for instance, still has 5,000 odd council houses. Some other districts don't have any, but I think there's a real opportunity for a county to combine social housing and social care.
On the last one, absolutely. I don't believe you can do any of the work that we're probably all aspiring to about social mobility and looking at difficult communities and families without joining up with housing is so very important. The other thing that it's given us the ability to do is to look at social housing in different ways, and particularly about specific housing. So we're doing quite a lot on small bungalow type housing in rural areas for older people, trying to get them to move out of the the family housing into something that's easier for them to manage and easier for us to get care to them. And so we're doing quite a bit of work on that. And we're talking closely to the CCG about that, and local GPs, because they understand it. We have an issue in Wiltshire on people that are, particularly older people, that are capital rich and revenue poor. So we've done quite a bit of work with the GPs on people that are coming in with respiratory problems and those sorts of things, that when you find out they're probably living in one very damp room in a very big house that they can't afford to manage, and how we can deal with that and give them support to move on, or if they need to, or at least get the house better for them and their health. So all those sorts of things we're doing, and therefore the relationship with the CCG is now very, very good. Very good, no problem at all. And with the individual GPs, I have to say, because it's not just the CCG, it's also with the groupings of GPs where you need to do work on what's available to them from the council, and how we can stop people going in as well as getting people out of hospital much quicker. So all that sort of work is very positive. PCC work is good. I'm a good mate of PCC. We meet probably monthly, and he's the one who, together with myself and my team, have been pushing on joint use of assets, us supporting them in IT, and all those things. So, many of my officers have fobs to get into the police headquarters, as equally as he has, and others officers have got fobs to get into Wiltshire Council. That's how it works for us. So was that
okay.
all? Was that everything?
Thank you very much. That's been very illuminating, very helpful. Thank you for coming today. I'm sure if there are any other questions, we'll put them in writing. We know where you are.
I'm very happy for this to go round to anybody, and I'm also very happy if anybody wants to talk to us at any time. But I want to make it clear, I haven't come here to tell you what's right. I'm telling you what's happened in Wiltshire. This is a very, very important thing for you and your communities to decide together, and if we can give any help with any information at all on the officer side or the member side, very happy to do so.
Thank you very much. Right, can we move to the next session, please, which is the Leicestershire and Rutland Association of Local Councils. And we've got Jake Atkinson, and we've also, understand, got representative from the National Association of Local Councils. Yes, absolutely, yeah. Right, thank you very much. Have you got each a presentation, an introduction, or do you want to move straight to questions?
I've got a verbal introduction I can give if the panel would appreciate that.
Please.
Okay. So, good morning, or is it good afternoon? Good afternoon, yes. LRALC is a professional membership association for local parish and town councils. We also cover parish meetings. We're the only county association nationally to have all parish and town councils in membership. We are the local experts on parish and town councils, their first port of call for advice, support, training and development. We work closely with NALC, and my colleague Justin is here with me today, and you'll hear from him shortly. But we are autonomous and set our own policy at a local level. My board has yet to take a view on the unitary proposals, though they have agreed that LRALC should ensure we keep our membership fully informed of all sides of the unitary debate. We have worked closely with the County Council, who have invited us to work with them to shape the engagement and consultation process with parish and town councils since the proposals were announced. This has enabled us to keep our member councils informed and up to date in an environment where the messages have become at times confusing and contradictory. We've tried to ensure that we have neutrally presented what I will characterise as both sides of the argument, though unfortunately we have not been directly involved or included in borough and district communications to their parishes, which has made our task a little harder, and I will be writing that to them to encourage them to do this with us. In the 7 years I've been in post as Chief Executive, LRALC has developed from a reactive organisation which responds to the needs and ambitions of our members to a proactive one which aims to raise ambition, quality and capacity within the parish council sector. An example of this is the big discussion events we initiated with the County Council 5 years ago, and I have some hard copies of that report if it's acceptable to leave those with members today. And the results of the electronic voting undertaken at these events, which centred around devolved services, which I would suggest is closely linked to the unitary agenda. The results of that electronic voting, which were solely, the events were solely for parish and town councillors and clerks, even surprised us, as at each of the 3 events, 2/3 of councils represented said they thought they had a role to play in local service delivery and devolved services. As members will know, and as has already been mentioned, the parish sector remains free from the application of the referendum principles which apply to other local precepting bodies. Indeed, the government has stated its intention not to apply these principles for a 3-year period from the 1st of April 2018 if the sector shows restraint. This and other statements from government illustrates the view they take of the role they see parish and town councils playing in the delivery of local services, I would suggest. So this all means that there are many parish and town councils who are looking to expand their role already and have already done so, and we are supporting them in that. And as an aside, and you know, I won't name the parish council without their permission, but one particular parish council has told me, for example, that even if the money suddenly became available to take back the library and the grass cutting, they would not give it back now that they have taken it on, because they see the benefit at a local level of having direct control of those assets and services. However, there are also a sizable minority of parish and town councils who feel that they do not or can't, do not want to or cannot do more. And this is for a number of reasons, I would suggest. Concern about increasing council tax in what has been a sustained period of austerity, lack of resources, lack of capacity, lack of knowledge, lack of will, I have to say, and sometimes it's simply an issue of size. We actually have parish councils with less than 150 electors because of those parishes shrinking. So we will always support the right of parish and town councils to say no. They don't want to get involved in devolved services, or you know, they don't support a unitary authority agenda. So we'll protect that right to say no if they have engaged with their residents and understand what services and facilities they want and are willing to pay for, and that echoes comments you've heard already this morning. So this means that a one-size-fits-all approach would not work under any unitary proposal, I would suggest. And there would need to be a range of options for parish and town councils, as with the Cornwall model. In addition, considerable support in the form of resources and training would be needed under any model, I would suggest, which sees parish and town councils taking on an expanded role, whether unitary or an expansion of the existing devolved services agenda. Another thing which I've not mentioned yet is also the need to create new councils, which we've supported a number of principal authorities on locally, and which I'm sure Justin can touch upon as well at a national level. But of course there's the option of smaller parishes clustering together, working formally through joint committees, or even parishes actually being redrawn, where a number of parishes join together to create one larger one. LRALC is able to quickly gather and share the views of our member councils on particular issues, and this is a role we will continue to play on key issues which face the sector. So although LRALC may not be able to take a position on the unitary proposals, we are in a position where we are able to gather and share the views of our members. The last thing I'll say is that I'm very proud of the way our member councils have constructively engaged with the unitary debate and other strategic county-wide issues, and I have no doubt that the parish and town councils will continue to share their views with the county and the districts and boroughs on the future of public services in Leicestershire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. Justin, did you want to do an introduction?
Yeah, just a few, I think, kind of three areas I wanted to touch on, Chairman, if I may. And thanks for having me. It feels like my life has come full circle, having worked on local government reorganisation in 1995, when I was working for the then Stoke-on-Trent District Council before it was becoming unitary. So I think reorganisation and how we can deliver better services is something that we're always going to be grappling with. There are three things I wanted to kind of, I think, share with you by way of reflections to add a bit of a national context to this. Now, we're the national membership body that represents the 10,000 existing parish and town councils in England, and it's 100,000 councillors. I think, as you'll know only too well across Leicestershire, parish councils give communities a voice or a structure for taking action. And they're actually the only growing bit of local government. More than 250 new parish councils have been created in the last decade. 43, I think, only in the last few years. And back on, I think I was struck by a point I think a colleague mentioned over there around it's not about the money, it's about community. Parish councils are very, very rooted in their communities with that local knowledge, that local experience and expertise. But we can't avoid the fact that actually communities have been investing more and more in local services and in local priorities. So parish council precepts have doubled in the last 10 years. So communities are investing themselves to the tune of £500 million, which they're leveraging in further investment to support local communities. I think also it's probably worth reflecting that parishes are changing and doing more. Again, you'll have seen that across Leicestershire, and we see that across the country. Not just as a result of reorganisation, but actually as a result of communities themselves that want to tackle local priorities, want to do things very, very differently. I think two other reflections on reorganisation itself in your conversation. I think this is a really good opportunity for you, your partners, for parish councils to strengthen local democracy and empower local communities. I think we very much welcome the recognition that the conversation and the proposal so far have placed on the role of local parish and town councils in wanting to work closer with them and empower them further. And as Jake says, and as you'd expect us to say this, this does open up the exciting opportunity of setting up more parish councils and bringing local democracy closer to parts of the county that don't have it at the moment. That very much, I think, it would be in tune with what happened, I think, when Jane and other colleagues went through reorganisation nearly a decade ago, from Wiltshire to Northumberland to Cornwall, everywhere. Universally parished the unparished areas. And I've not heard a single one of our councils in those areas say that they would go back and that they haven't flourished in that decade as a result of having more local control, more local decision making, greater opportunities for devolution and local empowerment. And then also I think on that, reflections from other colleagues in other parts of the country around how important I think the Leicestershire and Rutland Association is, as a partner for you, for working closely to empower parishes, build capacity, and support that community leadership, which I think Jane talked very eloquently about earlier. I think as part of your deliberations, it's probably worth looking at some other bodies of evidence that are around how we can get more effective local government and the bits of local government working much more closely together. So I'll leave these with you. We did some work with the Local Government Association earlier this year around our One Community Guide, and again struck by this sense of communities. They're all our communities and our places. So I think there are a number of lessons in there around how we can work better to support local areas and some good practice that's happening around the country. And then just a few I'm conscious of time, just a few, I think a list of some lessons and reflections from the last decade. And in recent kind of weeks and months, we've been talking to parts of the country that have been through reorganisation and through their experiences. And it's by no means an exhaustive list, but probably a number of things I think probably for you to be aware of that we're happy to talk to you further about and connect you with other parts of the country. And our colleagues have always said that actually the potential of local councils isn't always recognised as part of that conversation about restructuring and reorganisation. I think it's probably kind of fair to say that local councils are and working closer with them at the heart of your conversation, your proposals so far. That needs to build capacity within the sector, and particularly within colleagues such as Jake within the local association, who will be pivotal in your relationship with local councils. The varied ambition of communities, I think, which has been touched on quite a bit this morning. You know, there will be places that will be really up for taking on a bigger role, taking on more services, you know, making the most of the opportunities of devolution. There'll be areas that won't. You know, their priorities will lie elsewhere. Relationships take time, and I think you'll know that anyway, but particularly going through any change process, whether that's at elected member level or at officer level, embedding those relationships and building that trust as part of that journey, you know, is something that I think, again, as Jane said, it's a journey. It's not actually a destination. Collaborating and co-designing your proposals, whether that's kind of your business case or how you want things to work, particularly around area arrangements and area boards. I think, you know, it's very welcome that you've got colleagues like Jake and parish councils as part of that process. I, you know, urge you to keep on doing that. There's probably some merit in speaking to some parts of other parts of the countries, of some parish and town councils that have been through this process and learning directly from them. But the overwhelming, I think, message that's come out from my colleagues is the need for kind of a real openness and honesty around, and transparency around the process of which, you know, you're going through at the moment. I think just one final point is around that one size doesn't fit all. So I think, you know, whatever your conversation leads to, you know, there are, you know, all places are different, whether that's in across Leicestershire. So, you know, you'll need to have kind of different, I think, relationships and approach to different parts of the county.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we'll take some questions now. Jake, just a couple of, just establish the facts then. So you've got this board, and that's representative of the whole county. Is it the intention that the board will come to some, because at the moment you're neutral on this process, aren't you? On that, is it intention that at some point the board will come to a definitive view on what parish councils want? That's the first question. How many quality, is that the badge you get if you become a sort of enhanced council? How many quality councils have we got in Leicestershire at the moment? And do you know how many vacancies there are on parish councils? Do you keep the figures on that?
So I'll start with the last question. We don't hold those figures, though we do liaise closely with the elections teams at all the districts and boroughs and support parish councils on the issue of vacancies. I believe, for example, unfortunately, in one district in Leicestershire, at the last ordinary elections, there were no contested parish elections. And clearly that's not a position that we encourage or would like to see, but the cost of democracy, which has already been mentioned, is always present, and more districts and boroughs are having to pass down the full cost of elections to parish and town councils, which means, being pragmatic, some parish councils do aim to try and avoid a situation where they do not have contested elections, I have to say. I'm sure that won't come as a shock to anybody around the table. But we always encourage, you know, election is best, and we encourage them to spread the cost over the 4 years that they have. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. I believe also that, for example, Charnwood has introduced a policy whereby all their parish and town councils, if they have more than one vacancy remaining within 6 months of an election, they will automatically call another election to try and fill those seats, and that's automatic. That's a policy where that election will be called for them, and those councils will pay for the cost of that election. So I think it's trying to incentivise it. In terms of the quality scheme, which is now the local council award scheme, LCAS as it's called, which is run at a national level, the take-up hasn't been as high as we would have hoped. And I think that's for a number of reasons. There's so much going on in the sector at present. We're still very much encouraging it. We have a number of gold standard councils. We had one of the first 10 nationally, which is Anstey, for example. But we need to see those numbers rise, and you know, we would encourage districts and boroughs and the county to raise the ambition for their parishes alongside us to do that. Sorry, can you remind me of the first?
Well, I think it will be helpful to know whether your board intends to come to a view at some stage. You know, you're going to want to talk to both sides of the argument, as it were. But can you just explain who's on this board? Is it representative?
It is a representative board. We've moved to a incorporated structure, so we have a board of directors since April this year, and all of those directors are currently parish or town councillors, though we do have 2 positions on the board which can be taken by experts from other fields, if you like, to bring in that outside knowledge that we may need. So it's representative. Each of the 7 areas which are parished, which includes Rutland, have at least 1 director on the board. And we have considered it formally at our last board meeting, and my board instructed me that basically we're to keep a watching brief and also to keep our parishes fully informed. It will go back to the board. It's one of those situations where I can't preempt what they will wish to do. The problem is, as I would characterise it, that with 166 parish councils in Leicestershire who are members, they're all members of us, as well as 56 parish meetings, we would find it very difficult to take a position, I think, that would satisfy all of our members, especially when we want to preserve their right to say yes or no to devolved services or unitary proposals. So I'm sorry I can't give you a clearer answer than that, other than to say it will most definitely be coming back to our board as proposals progress.
No, that's helpful. Right, David Bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, colleagues around the room might have a slightly different experience of this, but it's my impression that in the market towns there's very little or no appetite for parish councils. This is certainly the case in Hinckley, and I think it might be the case in Colville as well. I don't know. I'm not sure. Loughborough, Market Harborough, Melton. I think what tends to happen in the market towns is people look to their local councillor, either borough or district or county, for a lead. And people don't seem to see the need for parish or town councils. How do we? Do you agree that seems to be the case? And how do you think that this situation should be addressed if we're going to roll forward to a unitary council?
I am not aware of any comprehensive engagement and consultation exercise around such a proposal within the time certainly that I've been in post. So I certainly wouldn't comment on whether the desire exists or not, because certainly nationally there is clear evidence that the desire exists, and I'll pass over to Justin shortly. So Crewe Town Council, for example, and lots of the community governance reviews that have been started have resulted in town councils being formed where they previously didn't exist, and of course you have to have popular support for that. We have been engaged in initial discussions in some of the towns that you've mentioned, and they've not progressed beyond initial inquiries. But yes, I would suggest that consultation and engagement around the specifics, I'm not aware that people really would understand enough at this stage about whether they would want a town council or not, because the information currently isn't at the forefront of their minds. I would suggest already readily available. I'll pass over to Justin because I'm sure he can comment on it on national.
When in your comment, can you just explain what the process is? So what's the deciding factor? Does the local authority just decide to do it, or is there like a referendum as to how you actually make it happen?
Shall I cover some of the mechanics of that alongside kind of a wider context? Okay, so in terms of the process of setting up a new parish and town council, that can be triggered in a number of ways. And what we tend to see across the country is actually that is in response to community demand for more control, more influence, a greater say over local services or particular issues that communities feel quite strongly about, that having a formal structure through a parish and town council with investment through the small share of the precept is one of the solutions how they can tackle that. So in terms of the process, it can be triggered by the local community through a petition, which would then lead to a formal process carried out by the district council, if there is one, or by the unitary authority, who will conduct a community governance review, so kind of a test around public support and whether that would secure convenient and efficient local government. Or it can be triggered by the principal authority itself in undertaking that exercise. So largely it comes in those two ways. I think broadening it out to what we see in the rest of the country, there is actually growing appetite, and particularly in places that are well defined, often where they are surrounded by an existing parish and town council structure, where they can point to, why are things different over there? Why are services provided there? Why is the quality of some of those amenities or facilities different? How is that community able to tackle some of those local issues or challenges in a way that we're not? I think, as Jake alluded to, particularly in town areas where we've seen that growth in communities wanting to set up parish and town councils. And I think another reflection is, people don't know what they don't know. I think how many people wake up in the morning and just know what all of their powers and levers are as a local citizen. They don't, and they don't know how they could influence housing development by doing a neighbourhood plan. They don't know, how they could run more services and influence local decisions through a parish council. They don't know how they could register a community asset to try and get it protected from any threat of it being sold off for other use. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do, the government needs to do, and I think local government needs to do around ensuring that people do know what their rights are, what the opportunities are, and certainly in our case, working with communities and talking to them about these opportunities and about these options opens up that conversation around how do places want to run themselves, how do they want to influence things, particularly in a context of shrinking public budgets, and actually that attractiveness of the community investing its own money in its own future, having more of a say over the things that really matter to them, is actually there's appetite for that that's really growing.
Come back, David.
All I can say is that it's been my experience, and I've been around this game a long time, that I haven't seen a queue of people beating a path to my door demanding a town council or a parish council. In fact, I can't remember anybody, I'm asking for trouble now, but I don't remember anybody ever pressing for a town council for Hinckley. I mean, if there was, then obviously I would be the first to respond and start the process. But to the best of my knowledge, people, as I said before, people simply look to their local councillor for a lead and for help and assistance, or to the CAB or whoever it might be. But I can't see that there's this demand for a further level of activity of that nature.
Okay, well, that's your local observation, which is helpful. Right, Terry Richardson.
Thank you, Chairman. As Jake will know, I'm a devotee of parish councils. It's the reason I'm sitting here today, because I signed up 30 years ago next February, and I'm still a member of the parish council. I think coming back to some of the points you made, I would add as well that in my district area we will be giving birth to a new parish council in May, which is rather exciting. But coming back to the point, what we're looking at here is strategically of what more parish and town councils might be able to do going forward. And in that respect, parish and town councils seem to have lots of powers under the general power of competency. But in practice, there are things that stop them. And I just wondered, and perhaps if I give you one example, you mentioned grass cutting. So we're quite a big parish. We maintain several parks and play areas. And we might be interested in mowing the verges. Now, to make it cost effective, we need to use red diesel to mow the verges, but we can't use red diesel because we have to mow our parks and play areas, which we use white diesel for. And because we're not big enough to have separate vehicles, it would be uneconomic for us to do. So my question really is, what are NELC and the RELC, for want of a better phrase, doing to take away some of those ridiculous HMRC anomalies, etc.? And also, just as an aside, you mentioned the gold standard. We had a long debate as parish council about the gold standard. And for the amount of additional work and cost involved to prove what we're doing is gold standard, it was not cost effective. So I do think we need to think carefully about the costs unnecessarily being put on parish and town councils, which might preclude them from wanting to do more going forward. So really my question is, what can you both do as to get rid of some of these ridiculous rules and regulations? Because, I mean, the diesel one alone should have been gone 20 years ago. And I suspect there are many, many parish and town councils breaking the law today.
Okay, Thank you for that. Some excellent points there, and I'm sure Justin again will add to the national picture. In terms of the red tape and dare I say bureaucracy, we as LRALC have helped a number of parish councils put forward proposals under the Sustainable Communities Act, which is the statutory channel for raising issues of bureaucracy and red tape. There's the barrier busting website, as they call it, where these can be lodged directly to government, and government have a duty to respond to any proposals. And we, for example, put forward a proposal to allow non-councillors on a parish council neighbourhood plan committee to be full voting members. And you've referenced councils perhaps breaking the law without realising it, and I'm sure that's a prime example. I have no doubt there are neighbourhood plan committees operating in parish councils where parishioners are voting, and unfortunately the law does not allow that. It's very clear, and we tried to get the government to change the law. Unfortunately, the concession was that they would clarify the guidance, but the government did not wish to change the law on that for reasons I won't go into. And before I pass to Justin, who will, I'm sure, talk about the policy work that NALC does and the very successful lobbying that they do. They've had some great successes. But the Local Council Award Scheme, any council that wants to look at doing that, we will come out as LRALC and do an audit of where they're at. The way I see the Local Council Award Scheme, the gold standard, if you like, is a framework for excellence, and a bit like Investors in People was. If you're acting in a way where you want to be the best, and if you're doing that, you'll be ticking most of the boxes anyway. And so, you know, I would hope that with our support, it will be a case of tweaking what you do rather than implementing whole processes that are unnecessary and costly. Is perhaps a different view I would give. But we can give support to parishes on that.
Anything to add on the national?
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely. Kind of with Terry around how we need to tackle some of these things that stop communities and councils from getting things done. So for us, there's a whole wide range, whether it's from kind of red diesel through to other kind of aspects of red tape, rules and bureaucracy that get in the way. And so, you know, to reassure you, we're pretty active engaging with government and others on those. And again, you know, Jane mentioned in her slide around, you know, developing as close a relationship as you can with the Secretary of State. You know, it's a big part of our job is to try and you know, build links with government and influence the policy agenda to tackle those kinds of issues. I think the main thing for us is we've tended to try and focus our efforts around the things that across the country universally our councils say to us, these are the things that we think are the big priorities. So so just in this year, and Jake mentioned council tax referendums, I think, you know, there's nobody in local government that doesn't think that local government should be able to raise the money that it needs from local people without any interference from local government. You know, and I think we're at one with the LGA and others on that. We've been very successful in getting that message across to government, actually around the fiscal responsibility that parish and town councils actually do have, with that direct accountability back to local people for the money that we're going to levy from you to invest in local services. That's a very direct, transparent and accountable conversation. GDPR, I don't think anybody hasn't been touched by and loved GDPR this year. So I think, you know, a lot of our campaigning work to make sure that our parish councils weren't forced to have to appoint data protection officers, you know, very costly exercise, you know, that costs the sector, you know, tens of thousands of pounds. And the very welcome announcement in the budget very recently about the exemption on business rates on public toilets. You know, these are just some of the things that consistently across the country all councils say to us, these are the priorities, these are the things that we want NALC and colleagues to be lobbying on, which doesn't mean to say that there are a number of other things, Terry, like kind of red diesel and other measures that we should be tackling. And I think, as Jake has said, you know, encourage you know, to use the Sustainable Communities Act. It's a tool there that's meant to bust barriers. But you know, I'm open to hearing from many of our councils across the sector around the things that are stopping them from getting on. And I think part of this exercise of looking at, you know, how can we run things better across the country, whether that's in Leicestershire or elsewhere, and make the most of the opportunities of devolution, that we do tackle some of those kind of fine grain, you know, rules and regulation that actually get in the way from doing good things.
Terry on.
Thank you, Chair. I come from Colville, which is an unparished town, and I do have to therefore take issue with my members to my left, because in Colville there is quite a lot of interest, certainly amongst the voluntary sector and the people interested in heritage, for historical reasons, which people will remember, in having a town council that would be able to take more responsibility. But my question therefore is, we also have a Colville Specialist Expenses, which is a cross-party of district councillors who work very well together to do a lot of good things with our parks and our events. So if this were to go ahead, I can see that there's a difficulty. How are we, if we were to set up a town council in Colville, which I think would be very popular, and I've got lots of people who want to go on it, how would we carve up the responsibilities of the area boards of unitary councillors, and what they're going to be doing for general health and well-being, and the responsibilities of the nascent town council, to ensure we're not treading on each other's toes or duplicating?
Thank you for that question. It's a very good question. Yeah, absolutely. Discussions have already started informally between LRALC and the relevant officers here at the County Council about, separate from the unitary proposals, I might add about a more formal framework for parish council local service delivery and devolved services. So exactly that kind of, okay, whose responsibility is what. I do have to say, one of the worst things any principal authority can do in terms of giving a message to members of the public and electors is when they phone up and are told this is now the parish council's responsibility, and the clerk gets a phone call saying, I've been told to call you because it's now your responsibility, apparently. And the key point there is principal authorities cannot force anything down to parish level. They might decide that they're going to stop doing it themselves, but they can't say it's now the parish council's responsibility. It's something the parishes can do if they wish. And one of the things that our parishes have long been asking for, and I quite understand the reason that the county hasn't been able to provide it, is a list, a menu of what is on offer in terms of these are the services you could take on if you wished. And having worked in other principal authorities, I do have to say the County Council has done really well to keep up with the I don't want to sound condescending, but the rapidly changing funding environment. I've seen that at first hand. But what that has meant is that the moment a list is produced, it can almost be out of date within a few weeks, if you see what I mean. Sorry, echoing there. So yes, those discussions are happening informally. We do work closely with the boroughs and districts on their particular local issues and with their parish liaison officers in terms of things they want the parishes to pick up. But I think it's something that should absolutely be key to any proposal going forward. And even if the unitary stuff doesn't go forward in terms of devolved services, there needs to be that clear framework. And if I'd encourage members to look at the Cornwall paper if they haven't already, even though it's a few years old now, and it spells out a range of offers, if you like, a range of different models. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
I think that raises a hugely important point, because I think one of the biggest selling points I've found locally for unitary status is the fact that you always end up ringing the wrong council. And in fact, in attempting to write about this in a recent article, I managed to get to the wrong way round, which was fortunately spotted by my chief whip. And so I think this is going to be a single point of access is hugely important to residents, I think. So if we are going down this road, and parish councils start taking on responsibilities, how are we going to coordinate to ensure that when people ring up, they aren't bounced, because that is the thing that really annoys them.
If I can just quickly come back on that, one of the things I always say when I'm training new clerks and new councillors, one of the huge advantages of having a parish council is that if you go and speak to a parish councillor or the parish clerk and say that the street light is out on the road, they won't turn around and say that's nothing to do with us. It's the other authority you want, and perhaps if they're lucky get given a phone number to call. They will take it on and they'll say, I'll deal with that for you. And so there is already very strong links. The relationship could be improved, but very strong links between, in particular, clerks and the county council in terms of making the county council's job easier to maintain its assets and services, because they do a huge amount of work that isn't their responsibility in essence. So I think that could be potentially built upon and that relationship improved and worked more efficiently. I've long argued for there being an ability for parish clerks to log into your systems to access the issues that they've raised around potholes and streetlights and so on, so that they can see the status of the job and keep an eye on all those things which are happening. And there has been movement from the council towards that kind of system, but yes. Okay.
Nick, you've got a question.
Thank you, Simon. I mean, obviously the parishing of the areas is very, very important. And we have 5 very large areas which aren't parished, which are Hinckley, Colville, Loughborough, Harborough and Melton Mowbray. In some, like Terry says, there's a special expense area where you're virtually parished anyway, but you've got no control over what it's spent on. I think in Melton they have like a town something or another. In Loughborough they've got nothing. In Harborough they've got... Oh, you have something in Loughborough? Oh, they have an area committee in Loughborough. In Harborough I don't... But anyway, they want parishing. But I think the idea to encourage them and to encourage people in Hinckley is the offer. Now, the offer will be developed through a business case. So as the guys here have said from the parish councils associations, you can't force a parish to do anything. So some of my little parishes, and I've got very tiny ones, may well want nothing. But we need to develop a business case and an offer to them that if they want these sort of services locally, these are the sort of services they could have. And this would come through a business case. So Hinckley may well eventually still say they don't want one. I think they should have one. I think it would be beneficial for Hinckley to have a town council. But we need to develop an offer to them of what they can have. And then on the particular question of election expenses, a business case would cover that. Now, if they were coterminous with a unitary authority, why bother charging them? It's just such small beer. If we can encourage people to stand for parishes by removing that one little thing that they have to technically pay for their own election, get rid of it, because we want to actively encourage parish councils to be formed and to take on responsibilities where they want them. And these would be above and beyond the area committees. But we've not got to a business case yet. But a business case will have to be developed to show people what is on offer across the piece, across the whole area.
Okay, Rosita.
Thank you. First of all, let me congratulate you for being so forward-looking over the years and having been so proactive, because it certainly has seen many positive changes within parish councils. My points have been very much addressed by Terry's point and your answers. If we are looking at devolving more responsibilities to parishes, we do need more policies, we need a more formal framework for parishes to adhere to. My question and my concern has very much come from some of my parish councillors, indeed my residents. If we are devolving more responsibility and more finances towards parish councils, there is a fear that these can be spent on unnecessary items advocated by an unelected body. So therefore, what can you do that parish councils in a possible new structure, and even if not, are subject to more public accountability, to do the proper communication and consultation with the residents, because after all, they can precept, and a lot of the residents aren't happy to have a great big precept that possibly buys them bulbs for, the verges or whatever. So, scrutiny, accountability, properly governed, and being subject to having consultation with the residents and probably making more of a business case, as this is the fashion word of today, for their expenditure. Thank you.
Any response?
Just very briefly on that, to give you a few pointers of how things have changed even in the time that I've been around, and you know, the transparency requirements have dramatically increased, especially for those councils with a turnover of less than £25,000. So they now have a mandatory transparency code, which you know, means that they should therefore be much more open to that scrutiny and accountability. Excuse me. In addition to that, I very much see most, if not all, of what you've just talked about, Rosita, as being our key core role. We are there to support and to raise the standards that councils operate at. Last Monday, for example, we launched a new course that was fully subscribed, called Medium-Term Planning for Local Councils, and that very much talked about the need to engage with your community to respond to their needs, different ways of doing that, different ways to actually plan more professionally rather than just year-on-year budgeting and planning over the medium term to spread the cost, and different ways of funding. And that's absolutely about addressing the kind of issues you talk about. At a government level, we help secure borrowing approval for parish councils. Lots of parish councils borrow for capital projects. The standards there have tightened up dramatically as well, so there now has to be at least a month-long formal consultation process that parish councils must evidence before they will get borrowing approval from the relevant government department. You've also got the support that NALC offers in terms of the model documents and toolkits that they offer, and we're also, both of us, both NALC and the local association, there for when things go dramatically wrong, which unfortunately they sometimes do, and we not only help those councils who perhaps fall foul of their own mistakes, but we help other councils learn from those. And I'm sure members around the table will be aware of perhaps councils where other councils have been able to learn from their experiences and, you know, make the necessary changes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to draw this session to a close, and thank you very much for your input into the debate, which will no doubt continue. Right, we need to break for lunch, but I'm very conscious that we haven't heard from two key witnesses, Voluntary Action Leicestershire and Citizens Advice. Are you able to be here for 2 o'clock, or have you got other commitments, gentlemen? Is that okay? Are you okay as well? I'm sorry to delay you, because we had hoped to get you in this morning. So what I'd like to do now is to break for lunch and reconvene at 2 o'clock with Voluntary Action Leicestershire. Thank you.